For more than 60 years, a single aerial photograph has divided archaeologists, geologists, and believers worldwide. In 1959, a Turkish army captain named İlhan Durupinar was flying over the mountains of eastern Turkey on a routine mapping mission for NATO when something in the terrain stopped him. Down below, at nearly 2,000 meters, with no river or sea in sight, was a formation with the exact silhouette of a ship's hull, about 164 meters long. Genesis attributes a length of 300 cubits to Noah's Arkansas. Using the Egyptian royal cubit, that figure equates to almost 157 meters. The difference between those two numbers is just a few meters. That alone would be enough to build a good story. But what almost no video on this topic mentions is that the man who spent years of his life convincing the Christian world that this was the Ark ended up signing, with his own name, the report that debunked it. And in April 2026, an international team once again installed a radar on that same hillside. What they found didn't close the debate. It reopened it completely. If the mysteries that almost no one dares to talk about pique your curiosity, stay until the end, because what you're about to hear doesn't end where you think. Genesis is uncomfortably precise for anyone seeking physical evidence of something that happened thousands of years ago. The text doesn't describe a large ship. It describes one 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, with a length-to-width ratio of 6:1 and a length-to-height ratio of 10:1. That ratio is neither accidental nor literary embellishment. In 1994, a group of Korean naval engineers, led by researchers Hong, Na, Paik, and Hyun, published a study in the technical journal Creation Ex Nihilo evaluating whether those proportions were viable for an actual ship sailing on the open sea, subjected to violent swells for months. Their simulations concluded that a 6:1 ratio offers a near-optimal balance between stability and resistance to severe swells, far superior to most known ancient naval designs, and even comparable to modern naval architecture standards designed for cargo vessels, not speedboats. In other words, someone, thousands of years ago, specified the dimensions of a ship that modern engineering could only just confirm as functional 34 centuries later. Now, the problem of converting those numbers into something measurable begins with a seemingly simple question. What cubit did the original author use? The common cubit measures about 45 centimeters. The royal cubit, used in large Egyptian and Mesopotamian projects, measures between 52 and 53 centimeters, a difference that, over 300 cubits, changes the final result by tens of meters. Using the Egyptian royal cubit, those measurements translate to something close to 157 meters long, 26 meters wide, and 16 meters high. The formation that Durupinar discovered measures 164 meters long, 86 feet wide, and 52 feet high, a difference of just 7 meters over a total length of 157. That is what, for more than half a century, has prevented anyone from simply dismissing the site and moving on. Here's a detail that most accounts of this phenomenon overlook, and it's worth remembering for later. The formation isn't, as many people assume, on Mount Ararat itself. It's about 29 kilometers to the south, on the slopes of a different volcano called Mount Tendurek, near a village called Uzenjali, at an altitude of between 1,966 and 2,004 meters above sea level. According to local accounts, a combination of heavy rains and at least 3 earthquakes exposed the landform in May 1948. A Kurdish shepherd named Rezhit Sarihan was, according to these same accounts, the first person to notice the unusual silhouette in the mud. 11 years later, in October 1959, came the aerial photograph of Durupinar, originally taken by a Turkish Air Force soldier named Sefket Curtis during a mapping mission for NATO. A group that included Durupinar himself and photogrammetry professor Arthur Brandenberger inspected the site in September 1960. After 2 days of excavation and the use of dynamite inside the formation, the official statement was unequivocal. No visible archaeological remains were found, and they concluded that it was a whim of nature, not something man-made. That same year, the American magazine Life published the photograph, and that image reached the hands of an explorer named David Fasold, a man dedicated for years to searching for real shipwrecks on the seabed, not biblical archaeology. Fasold first visited the site in 1977, after spending months interviewing those who had been there in 1960, and became so convinced of what he saw that he devoted a good part of the next 2 decades of his life to documenting it, writing about it in his book The Ark of Noah, and publicly defending it against any skeptics who stood in his way. What Fasold began documenting in the 1980s seemed, at first, too good to be true. About 20 kilometers from the formation, near a village known locally as Arzap or Kazan, he found enormous vertical stones with a hole drilled near the top, some carved with an interior cavity designed, according to his interpretation, to hold a knotted rope without it wearing out from friction. He called them drogue stones, the old term for the drag anchors that boats use to avoid capsizing in rough waters. Over the years, 26 of these stones were documented, some more than 3 meters high and weighing several tons, several with crosses carved into their surface, some with as few as 3 and others, according to Fasold's own drawings, with up to 20. According to his interpretation, they were distributed in a line pointing directly toward the formation, as if someone had released them as the water level dropped. But here's the twist that almost no video on this topic mentions. In September 1994, Fasold himself returned to the site, this time accompanied by Australian geologist Ian Plimer. 2 years later, in 1996, he published a study with American geologist Lawrence Collins, its title leaving no room for ambiguity: Turkey's fake Noah's Ark, exposed as a common geological structure. The supposed metal beams turned out, according to this microscopic analysis, to be natural concentrations of limonite and magnetite trapped in layers of sedimentary rock at the boundaries of a doubly dipping synclinal fold. What appeared to be fossilized gopher wood bark was actually peridotite metamorphosed by entirely natural processes. And the drogue stones were found to be local volcanic andesite, a rock that could never have been transported from Mesopotamia. Interestingly, stones with similar shapes and holes are scattered throughout ancient Armenia, where they are recognized as sacred pagan stones that later Christian communities reused as gravestones. The man who most wanted this to be the Ark ended up signing the document that said it wasn't. But that twist doesn't explain why, 30 years after that retraction, someone is still returning to that mountain with technology that neither Fasold nor Collins ever had available for nearly 2 decades. The case seemed practically closed to most geologists, and this was reflected in much of the subsequent literature, including analyses by Turkish researcher Murat Avci on the relationship between the formation and the surrounding Tel Seker earthflow. But the subsurface scanning technology of 2019 was nothing like what existed in 1996. Ground-penetrating radar, known as GPR, and electrical resistivity tomography, known as ERT, now allow mapping structures buried several meters deep without disturbing a single surface stone, something that in Fasold and Collins' time would have been practically science fiction. And a group of independent researchers decided to revisit this terrain, this time without preconceived notions of what the answer would be. The project is called Noah's Ark Scans, and its technical lead is a researcher named Andrew Jones, who has been unusually honest on a point few science communicators mention. He is neither an archaeologist nor a geologist by training. He is a software developer who works with ground-penetrating radar, and he states this explicitly in every interview. Since 2019, his team has collaborated with Turkish universities, including Dr. Fethi Ahmet Yüksel of Istanbul University, and more recently, Professor Cenker Atalla of the Archaeology Department at Shivas Cumhuriyet University, with official permission from the Turkish government. Between 2021 and 2023, the first scans detected angular structures at a depth of up to 6 meters. That would be highly unusual, Jones says, if the terrain were simply a solid block of rock or the result of a random mudflow. In his own words, quoted by the Turkish newspaper Yeni Şafak, "We have detected some interesting things. By 2024, soil analyses yielded a finding that no previous study had documented with such precision. Samples taken within the formation's perimeter contained nearly 3 times as much organic material as samples taken from the surrounding terrain, along with elevated potassium levels and a lower than expected pH." William Crabtree, a soil specialist on the team, publicly noted that this combination is consistent with the decomposition of ancient wood, though he acknowledged that it is not conclusive proof on its own. It's worth reiterating an important point here. Up to that point, not a single object made by human hands had been excavated. Only patterns that, researchers say, do not behave like ordinary rock. The team collected samples from at least 22 points across the site, resuming work that had been attempted before. In 1988, researchers John Baumgartner and Salih Bayraktuten drilled 4 sample pits at the site, though only 3 reached a significant depth, leaving most of the formation geologically uncharacterized. And by the spring of 2026, those patterns became specific enough that no one could simply ignore them anymore. In April 2026, Jones's team published the results of their most recent scan, conducted in collaboration with Turkish specialists. The radar revealed something no previous survey had detected with such clarity: a central corridor approximately 4 meters wide, running the entire length of the formation. The walls had sharply right angles, something a natural synclinal fold shouldn't produce so symmetrically along its entire length. Overlapping layers suggested something akin to 3 distinct decks, exactly as Genesis describes a lower, second, and third deck. The researchers themselves were explicit about something few media outlets repeated with the same honesty. They are not claiming to have found an intact wooden ship. They are looking for residual traces of ancient organic material, possibly preserved within a petrified mudflow. As of the time of this video, no man-made object has been conclusively excavated, a fact the team readily acknowledges. And here we return to the detail we mentioned at the beginning of this story, the one that seemed like mere geographical trivia. The formation was never on Mount Ararat. Since 1948, it has been on Mount Tendurek, a different volcanic mountain almost 30 kilometers away from the larger Ararat. And that changes the question. If this turns out to be the Ark, the idea that it rested specifically on the Ararat that we all recognize on maps today would have to be revised. If it isn't, then someone, thousands of years ago, chose this secondary mountain, neither the highest nor the most visible in the region, to leave 26 perforated stones that no one has been able to explain as having any use other than ancient navigation. Neither possibility is comfortable. This doesn't rewrite world history, but it does change one specific thing about this particular story. The question is no longer whether a boat-shaped formation exists in the mountains of eastern Turkey. No one disputes that. It's there and anyone can photograph it from a drone today. The real question is how willing we are to trust physical evidence that 2 teams of geologists, looking at the exact same rocks with different instruments in different decades, interpreted in opposite ways. David Fasold didn't change his mind out of a lack of faith or pressure from some institution that wanted to discredit him. He changed his mind after taking another geologist to the site and examining his own samples under a microscope with his own hands. That's unsettling. No matter which side of this debate we feel more comfortable on. The man who most needed this to be the Ark, the one who dedicated 20 years of his life to it and wrote an entire book defending it, ended up denying it with his signature on a scientific paper. And that leaves open a question broader than this single mountain. How many other certainties we take for granted depend, at heart, on who told the story first, and whether anyone later had the courage to revisit it. The next time someone tells you that science has proven something about faith, or that faith has proven something about science, it's worth asking a very simple question. Who exactly made that measurement, with what instruments, and what happened the day someone else decided to repeat it with different eyes? Andrew Jones's team is still working on that mountain right now, with core drilling planned for later this year, finally searching for something solid beneath those layers of Turkish mud. If you want to know what they find when those drills reach the bottom, and whether this story ends up looking more like Fasold's faith in 1977 or Fasold's retraction in 1996, subscribe and hit the bell, because as soon as there are new results from that mountain, you'll be among the first to hear them here.